Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something that's, well, popping up more and more for lots of us in the UK, sharing our backyards with mammals.
Yeah, it definitely seems like these encounters are becoming much more frequent.
They are, as towns and cities grow, those lines between our space and wildlife space get really blurry.
Exactly. And understanding how to sort of handle these interactions thoughtfully is getting pretty essential.
Right. So our focus today, it's really practical. We're diving into an ebook. It's a kind of preliminary guide for coexisting with these backyard mammals in the UK.
hmm
Think of it like your first stop for getting informed, not to make you an expert overnight, but, to give you that key starting knowledge.
So you feel a bit more confident.
Yeah, confident in those first steps before you even think about calling in professionals. We want to cut through maybe the confusion and just give you a clear idea of what to do.
Makes sense. So we'll be looking at how to spot some common species you might find, what you can do responsibly straight away. Then the legal side, which is honestly often overlooked, but really vital.
Ah, the legal stuff, yeah.
And crucially, knowing when it really is time to call in the experts.
Okay, let's get started then. So the ebook kicks off by introducing, the usual suspects we might find having a poke around our gardens.
Right.
We're talking red foxes, European badgers, gray squirrels, bats, brown rats, and the smaller ones too, like wood mice and house mice.
Yeah, the common crew.
And the guide points out each one leaves little clues, doesn't it? Like red foxes might leave droppings, they're sort of calling cards in flower beds, or maybe you see them checking out the bins.
That's right. And that's scent marking. That's key fox behavior. It's how they map out their territory, which, affects where they go in your garden. Understanding that helps.
Okay.
The badger, well, they might leave those little shallow scoops in the lawn, hunting for worms and grubs.
Ah, right.
And you might even stumble across an entrance to their home, their set, which often houses a whole family group.
Interesting. And then the gray squirrel. We know them. Sometimes they decide our lofts are prime real estate.
Oh, yeah.
You hear the scratching, and they can cause real trouble gnawing wires, insulation.
Definitely. Bats, though, are a bit more subtle. You might not see the bats themselves easily, but maybe you'll catch them flitting about at dusk, hunting insects.
Yeah.
Or you might find tiny droppings building up under where they roost, often like in the eaves or up in the attic space.
Okay. And the less welcome ones, rats.
Well, brown rats tend to leave more obvious droppings, and you might find burrows near compost bins, anywhere there's food, really.
Right.
Mice, similarly, tiny droppings, often near stored food, especially when the weather changes.
Right. So the guide says the very first step, and this is crucial, is responsible observation. Not, getting involved, but just quietly watching. Dawn or dusk is best. Apparently, that's when they're most active.
Exactly. And the guide even suggests, which I thought was neat, using your phone camera or maybe a wildlife camera to record them from a distance.
Oh, good tip for the tech fans.
Yeah. But the key is responsible. It means gathering info without stressing the animal out or making it change what it would normally do, just being a quiet witness.
Okay. And that leads right into the next thing, documenting what you find. The ebook really hammers this home play detective a bit.
Right. Take photos.
Photos of signs, yeah. Tracks, droppings, maybe burrows, any damage that looks wildlife related.
And, thinking bigger picture, documenting helps you spot patterns. Logging, when you see something, how often, where.
Yeah.
It tells you if it's just passing through or if it's more settled.
And here's a really useful bit. The guide specifically says, pay attention if you see young animal.
Ah, yes. Very important.
Because that's a big clue, isn't it? Suggests a nest or a den,
Mm-hmm.
which totally changes how you need to approach things, gives you that clearer picture.
Absolutely. Seeing young often means you're in a more sensitive situation, especially when we get to the legal protections for some species, which we'll get into.
Okay, so we've taken notes and photos. What practical stuff can you actually do? The guide moves on to prevention next. Things you can do to make your place less appealing.
And these are often pretty straightforward things, but honestly, they can work really well. Securing outdoor food is number one.
Pet food left out overnight.
Exactly.
Right.
Don't leave pet food out. Secure lids on compost bins. Even bird feeders think about the spilled seed. That attracts rodents.
Right, and squirrels. They love a bird feeder, don't they?
Oh, definitely. The guide also pushes for bins with proper wildlife-proof lids. Simple, but it works.
Yeah.
And then there's checking for holes. Sealing up potential ways into sheds, garages, even the house itself. that little gap you keep meaning to fix.
Yeah, get it done now.
Exactly. And don't forget basic garden tidiness.
How so?
Well, trimming back overgrown bushes, keeping things neat near buildings. It just reduces the cover for wildlife, makes it less inviting for them to set up shop right next to your house.
Okay, so these are proactive things that can stop problems before they even start.
Precisely. Often, that's enough.
Right now we're heading into a really critical bit. This could save you a lot of hassle, maybe even legal trouble. Understanding the actual laws around these animals in the UK.
Yes, this is crucial, because the rules are specific and you really need to know them.
It raises that key question, are they protected? And how much?
And the answer varies a lot between species. Knowing the difference is, well, essential.
Okay, let's start with bats. The guide says they are fully protected everywhere in the UK.
And fully means fully. It's illegal to disturb them, capture, injure, kill.
Right.
But also, and this is key, it's illegal to damage or block access to their roosts, even if the bats aren't actually in the roost at that moment.
Wow, even if it's empty temporarily.
Even then. And the penalties show how serious it is. Fines up to £5,000 per bat.
Per bat.
And potentially 6 months in prison.
Okay, that's definitely something you need to be aware of. Huge implications.
It really underlines why you leave bats alone and get expert advice immediately if you think you have a roost. Any work that might affect them needs a proper license. No DIY.
Okay, next up, badgers. Protected too, right? Under their own act.
Yes, the Protection of Badgers Act 1992. Similar idea to bats, illegal to damage, block, or destroy their sets, their burrows,
Okay.
or even disturb a badger while it's in a set. You can't just fill in a badger hole you don't like.
Right. You need a license for any interference.
Absolutely. And again, serious penalties, unlimited fines and fine or up to 6 months jail time. So if you've got badger sets nearby, you need to tread very carefully.
That protection makes sense given how long they can use those sets for.
Exactly. They're complex structures, ecologically important, and vulnerable.
Okay, now, shifting gears a bit. Gray squirrels, the situation's different here.
Very different. They're classed as an invasive non-native species, which means, counterintuitively maybe, it's actually illegal to release one back into the wild if you trap it.
Really? So if you catch one?
You must either humanely dispatch it or, under very specific conditions, pass it to a licensed rehab center. But you can't just let it go.
Huh. But you still have to be humane.
Oh, absolutely. Even though they're invasive, any control methods have to follow the Animal Welfare Act. Humane treatment is still required.
That's complex, managing invasives while still being humane.
It is. It reflects the difficulty in dealing with species that impact native wildlife, like our red squirrels.
Okay. What about brown rats and mice, wood mice, house mice?
Well, they don't have specific legal protection like bats or badgers.
Yeah.
But the guide is very clear. Any control measures must still be humane.
Right. Animal Welfare Act again.
Yes, and also guidelines from bodies like the Health and Safety Executive, HSE, and CRU, the Campaign for Responsible Rodenticide Use.
What do they cover?
They're about ensuring methods don't cause unnecessary suffering and, crucially, don't accidentally harm other animals, like pets or non-target wildlife, through poisons, for example.
So more flexibility maybe, but still a strong emphasis on doing it responsibly and humanely.
Absolutely paramount, yes.
And finally, red foxes. Where do they stand legally?
They aren't specifically protected under the main wildlife acts. So control is legal, but same principle applies. Must be humane. Must follow other relevant laws.
Like laws around firearms or pest control methods.
Exactly. And animal welfare laws always apply. Plus, it's worth remembering, hunting foxes with dogs is largely illegal now under the Hunting Act 2004, bar some very narrow exceptions.
So even with no specific protection, humane treatment is the baseline.
Always should be the guiding principle.
Yeah, the ebook really, really stresses this point. Always check the latest up-to-date legislation. Things can change.
They can.
And if you're even slightly unsure about the rules for an animal or what you're allowed to do,
get expert advice. Don't guess.
Yes, because getting it wrong with a protected species could land you in serious legal trouble.
Definitely. It's just not worth the risk for you or the animal.
Okay, so we know who might show up, how to watch and prevent, and the critical legal side. But when do you say, okay, my DIY efforts aren't cutting it, time to call someone?
The guide gives some pretty clear triggers for when professional help is really the next step.
Like what?
Well, first off, if you've got animals actively nesting or roosting inside a building, your house, shed, garage.
So bats in the attic, for instance.
Exactly. Trying to deal with a bat colony yourself, it's likely to fail, and it's illegal anyway. That's a clear call the experts moment.
Makes sense. What else?
If you suspect an animal is sick or injured, if it looks obviously wounded, has signs of disease like mange, or is acting really strangely, like being sluggish or approachable.
Yeah, you worry about that.
Right. Contact an expert or a wildlife rescue group. They can assess it properly and know how to handle it safely and legally.
Okay, another trigger.
If you've really tried the prevention stuff we talked about, secured food, sealed holes, tidied up, and you're still having persistent problems.
So if the basic steps haven't worked.
Yeah. It suggests you might need more specialized knowledge or tools that professionals have, especially for established issues.
And I guess looping back to the legal bit.
Absolutely.
Oh.
If legal restrictions apply to the animal you're dealing with, bats, badgers particularly, you simply must involve licensed experts. Don't even attempt to handle it yourself.
That's what they're there for.
Precisely.
So what do these wildlife consultants actually do when you call them?
Well, the guide mentions things like on-site visits to properly ID the species, which sounds basic but can be harder than you think and is really important.
Okay.
They can advise on deterrents that are legal and actually work for that specific animal. They can connect you with licensed handlers or wildlife rehab centers if an animal needs moving or care.
Right.
And sometimes they provide formal reports, which you might need for, say, insurance purposes, or if you're managing a property.
Okay, good to know what they offer. Finally, the guide wraps up with a note on ethics.
Yeah, the broader picture. It encourages avoiding lethal control if there are other options.
Respecting the protected species, obviously.
And just generally valuing these animals as part of the local biodiversity. It's a reminder that we're sharing the space.
Which I think is a really important point. It reflects that growing awareness of, how interconnected everything is.
Exactly. The inherent value of the wildlife around us.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the key takeaways from Black Dive today.
Yeah.
First, observe carefully. Document what you see.
Right. Be a good detective.
Second, put those basic prevention steps in place. Make your garden less of an easy target.
Secure food, bins, entry points. Tidy up.
Third, and this is maybe the biggest one, get your head around the legal differences. Know who's protected and what that means. Bats, badgers.
Yeah.
Very different from squirrels or rats.
Crucial. Don't guess the legal stuff.
And fourth, recognize those clear triggers for when you need to stop DIY and call in the professionals. Animals inside, sick animals, failed prevention, legal issues.
Yeah. Know when to ask for help.
Ultimately, it's all about aiming for, responsible coexistence, isn't it? Acknowledging these animals are part of the world we live in.
That's the goal. Sharing the environment respectfully.
Exactly. And maybe on that thought, here's something to mull over. With towns expanding and habitats changing all the time, what are the longer-term implications for how we live alongside these creatures? And maybe, what other questions does this raise for you now about balancing our needs and theirs in this shared world?
Definitely something to think about going forward. That balance is key.